Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Dear newlyweds and esteemed guests, I'd like to take this moment to offer congratulations to the groom on behalf of Eugenio and Félix. Rest assured, they're doing fine. However, they do look at their father's photograph and shed tears every day. Outraged, the shift manager swiftly grabbed the microphone from Agata's grip, offering a hasty apology as he handed it to an approaching toastmaster. "Follow me, right now," he ordered. He ushered her into the restaurant's storage room and, with a forceful push, she found herself sitting on a small leatherette couch, sandwiched between cardboard boxes, water jugs, and miscellaneous supplies. "Have you lost your mind?" he bellowed, his restraint gone. "What was that display about? Do you fancy yourself some local celebrity? Do you have any idea of the caliber of guests who hold their banquets here?" Agata looked up, her breath ragged and her throat tight. She was more than familiar with their kind. It wasn't long ago when she herself was part of that elite circle, able to host grand parties with astronomical bills. "Why aren't you saying anything?" Daniel erupted. "If you don't explain this ludicrous act and figure out how to remedy the situation, I guarantee not only will you lose this job, but I'll ensure no one in the service industry will even consider hiring you again. Say goodbye to decent pay and generous tips. In fact, you'll wish you could forget this ever happened." "He's my husband," Agata responded, her voice steady. She had regained her composure. The shock had ebbed, clarity returning, and the pieces began to align in her mind. "Yes, he's my lawful husband," she said, answering the unspoken question in Daniel's shocked eyes. "He died almost 2 years ago. Now, it seems he's come back to life. You've lost it. Or wait, is it white fever?" Daniel tried to recall the term, chuckling nervously. "Have you been drinking? Sneaking drinks on the job?" "I haven't had a drop," she retorted. "I don't drink." "If you're sober, then you must be mad," Daniel said, unwilling to dig deeper into what might have prompted his usually quiet and dependable employee to act out at such a high-end event. "Go out there and apologize publicly. If you can spout such nonsense, you can find the words to apologize." He gripped her elbow, steering her towards the storeroom exit. "Let's just say it was a joke, testing the nerves of the newlyweds. Okay?" "Yes," he answered himself. "Let go." Agata's voice rose in sudden anger. "Release me. I've said what I needed to, and I'm not saying another word." "Oh, really?" Daniel's temper flared. "Then consider this your last day here. On your way out, make sure to check in with payroll. They'll have a note on your record to ensure you'll never." Agata didn't wait to hear the rest. She dashed back into the storeroom, yanked off her waitress uniform, and tossed it in the trash. Swiftly changing into her own attire, she didn't spare a glance at a mirror, grabbed her purse, and bolted out the restaurant's back door. As she did, a large, muscular figure tried to grab her. But Agata, once an athlete, wasn't easy to catch. She deftly maneuvered between towering stacks of pallets in the alleyway. Using her agility, she quickly scaled them until she was even with the mesh fence and then jumped from a significant height. She took off running, not daring to glance back, certain that if they caught her, her life would be in grave danger. At that moment, all Agata could think about were her children, her 2 precious boys aged 3 and 6. She had to save them, take them away, hide them somewhere safe. She sprinted through the roads and darted into a grove of trees. Passing by a park fence, she swiftly turned off her cell phone to avoid being tracked. She continued to run, feeling like prey being chased by a predator. Finally, she entered a large shopping mall, rushing inside and quickly making her way up an escalator to the 3rd floor. She passed one store after another, then a cafe, a play zone, and a cinema. Walking briskly into the cinema snack area, she slipped into the restroom, locked the door, and took a moment to breathe. She needed to lay low for about 10 to 15 minutes. By her calculations, that should give her a good head start. If they didn't catch up to her by then, she could rush back home, pack up, and leave. Leaving again. What other option did she have? 8 years ago, Agata, fresh out of the pedagogical university and a rising skiing talent, met Roberto, the man who would become her husband. This meeting marked a significant turn in her life, clearly dividing it into before Roberto and after Roberto. Initially, she believed he was her guardian angel, a blessing, a wonderful turn of fate. She'd imagined that life with him would be endlessly joyful and prosperous. How wrong she was. They had met at a banquet celebrating the anniversary of the elite sports school where Agata had recently been appointed as a coach. The school was prestigious, and its coaches were handsomely paid. To truly fit into this team, one needed a host of qualifications and accomplishments. And Agata had them in spades: advanced skiing achievements at 12, candidacy for sports mastery at 14, and full mastery by 16. She'd competed in numerous national and international events, accumulating victories, awards, and recognitions. A bright future seemed assured. Yet, as it turned out, destiny, or perhaps her own choices, had something different in store. Maybe we alone are accountable for the decisions we make in life, guiding our path. This was a realization Agata would come to later on, contemplating where things went wrong. It seemed she was the master of her own fate. But those thoughts were years in the future. Back then, she was simply captivated by the man standing before her, tall, fit, and with captivating eyes. Her heart fluttered, reacting as if butter had been moved from the cold of a freezer to the warmth of the sun. "Allow me to introduce myself," the striking man began with a charming tone. "I'm Roberto, here on behalf of a company that helped establish this institution." "And you are?" His gaze made Agata feel as if she were floating on air. This was the man she had yearned for, the one she had envisioned in her dreams for so many years. "Agata," she answered warmly, imbuing her voice with all the tenderness she felt. "It's a pleasure to meet you." "The pleasure is entirely mine, believe me." "Would you like a drink?" They made their way to the bar. Roberto ordered a martini cocktail with raspberry syrup for her, while he opted for whiskey. As they sipped their drinks, they chatted and laughed. More cocktails were ordered, and as the evening wore on, they found themselves in a luxurious hotel room, wanting to get to know each other on a more intimate level. Agata was well aware of the night's trajectory, but she wasn't concerned. The innocence of her youth was behind her. What was there to lose if things didn't pan out? Nothing at all. But if things did go well, she felt she had so much to gain. She had always envisioned the life with a man like Roberto, prosperous, self-sufficient, and able to offer her all that she felt she deserved. After all, she was stunning and fully aware of it. She maintained her beauty meticulously, knew how to carry herself with grace, and had accomplished much in life. Why shouldn't she now enjoy the fruits of her labors in the form of such an appealing, charismatic, and undeniably wealthy partner? Together, they would be the envy of many. By morning, it was clear Roberto shared her sentiments. "Agata, you're incredible," he exclaimed as breakfast was served to their room. "I'll be direct. Romantic gestures aren't really my style. It's not that I'm unwilling to spend on you, far from it, trust me. I just value transparency. Clarity is essential to me. A yes is a yes, a no is a no. I truly appreciate that you didn't play any games or dance around the topic. That means a lot to me. How would you feel if I asked you to be my wife?" "You aren't already married, are you?" he asked, a hint of concern evident as her eyebrows rose in astonishment. "Me?" she replied with a beaming smile. "Absolutely, yes." "Great!" Roberto exclaimed. Yet his enthusiasm felt a bit rehearsed, like a child accustomed to having his every whim indulged. Agata only recognized this nuance later, when reflecting on their relationship's inception. "Get dressed, and we'll head to my parents'," he announced with confidence. "Now? Just like that?" "Straight to your parents," she chuckled, finding the entire scenario surreal. "Yes," Roberto affirmed with a nod. "Why delay? I'm fond of you, and you feel the same about me. We're both grown adults who are certain of our desires. I'm ready to start a family, and I believe you're the ideal partner. I offer you not just love, but also security and provision. I'm confident we'd have wonderful children. That's not a concern for you, is it?" His tone shifted to one of slight apprehension. "Not in the slightest," Agata responded with assurance. "Could I have 30 minutes to prepare?" That very evening, the freshly betrothed pair visited Roberto's parents for a preliminary introduction. Hello, dear." Roberto's aging mother welcomed Agata with the warmth of a long-awaited relative. The prospective father-in-law, reserved by nature, greeted her cordially with few words. Roberto's mother, aged not just in years but also in appearance, embodied Agata's mental picture of a village matron, radiating genuine warmth and kindness. "Oh, bless. We've long anticipated this day. At last, your grandfather and I might see our great-grandchildren," she proclaimed, her eyes glistening as she dabbed them with her handkerchief. Advancing towards Agata, she asked softly with outstretched arms, "May I embrace you, dear?" Touched, Agata leaned down to accommodate the diminutive woman, given her own statuesque stature. Their embrace lingered, and as the seconds ticked by, Agata began to feel the weight of the oddity of the situation. After all, they were practically strangers. Roberto hadn't even briefed his family about her, considering they had only met the prior day. Sensing this, the elderly woman, with a tinge of chagrin, quickly remarked, "Yes, what was I thinking? Please, come to the table, our honored guests. I've prepared some pastries, homemade dumplings, and preserves the blessings from above." "Let's go," Roberto urged, leading her with an expansive grin. "Mother has outdone herself, just look how pleased she is." "Yes, I can see," Agata agreed, thoroughly charmed. At lunch that day, Agata felt like she had surely added a couple of kilograms. Later, she would ruefully think, "Why did I indulge so much? Now I'll have to diet for a week." But how could she have refused? The diminutive old lady watched her with imploring eyes, letting out a forlorn sigh whenever Agata passed on any dish. Until next time, Roberto's mother blessed them as Agata and Roberto left the welcoming home. "Have they lived here long?" Agata inquired during their return journey, her gaze fixed on the posh gated community with its imposing fences, barriers, and round-the-clock security, the complete luxury package. It seemed improbable that these elderly folks could afford such splendor. Their modest home, from which Agata and Roberto had just departed, was dwarfed like a small dinghy surrounded by opulent yachts and imposing mansions. "Oh no, not for long," Roberto clarified. "They used to reside in a regular rural area, and I was born there. Later, when I became financially stable, I purchased this plot for them and had this house built. It's secure, comfortable, and has 24/7 amenities. A housekeeper visits once a week, and there's scheduled lawn care in the summers. Apart from that, my mother handles everything herself. Thankfully, she's still hale and hearty." "Incredible," Agata remarked, gazing at Roberto with newfound respect. It's noteworthy how some individuals, once they're financially independent, remain so devoted to their aging parents. They had already slated their wedding for the upcoming month. Clearly, Roberto had influential contacts. On their wedding day, they were greeted like VIPs, ushered to plush seating, and handed their pre-filled marriage documents. All that remained was to verify the details and affix their signatures. "Get accustomed to this," Roberto quipped with a triumphant smile as they exited the registry where other anxious couples were still stuck in a lengthy line. "With me by your side, rest assured you'll always experience the finest." "How do you pull this off?" Agata wondered aloud, her previous expectations eclipsed by this newfound opulence. "It's all down to the damned metal," Roberto said with a wry smile. "The world, you see, pivots around it." Agata quickly grasped the extent of Roberto's influence. Her life had taken a complete 180-degree turn. The opulent, enchanting wedding that a professional agency arranged for her and Roberto exceeded her wildest dreams. Among the many luxuries was a champagne fountain, and not just a metaphorical one. An impressive, life-sized fountain, complete with a marble base and gleaming sprayers, gushed champagne instead of water. Guests could either dip into the expansive bowl of bubbly or fill their glasses as they pleased. Illuminated by captivating evening lights, the fountain flowed for a full 2 hours. Many guests, already in high spirits, indulged themselves by relishing the extravagance. The atmosphere was filled with laughter, jests, and jubilation. Selfies were a must, and the professional photographer's flashes lit up the venue continuously. The wedding became an entertainment spectacle for all in attendance. The crowd was so vast that Agata struggled to recognize even a small portion of the attendees amid the hustle and bustle. But Roberto reassured her. These are all significant figures, he had explained the previous day when an overwhelmed Agata asked about the multitude of guests. While they had only a few close relatives and genuine friends, Roberto encouraged Agata to invite everyone she knew. Predictably, no one declined. Word of her engagement to Rodriguez circulated their professional network faster than hot gossip. "You've hit the jackpot, Agata," was the typical response she got. "How did you pull this off? Get ready for the good life. But remember us little people and still hit the gym." "I'm not going anywhere," Agata would affirm to them. Yet, the knowing smiles that met her assurances began to unsettle her. It felt as if they were privy to something she wasn't. "You won't mind if I continue my training in competitions, right?" she broached with Roberto during a rare quiet moment amid the festivities. "Of course not," he replied. "Train and compete to your heart's content, at least until we have kids. And after that," she prodded. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," he responded, smiling and softly stroking her face. "Don't fret, love. We'll make sure things work out just the way you want." Somewhat reassured, Agata approached her parents, who looked a bit overwhelmed amidst the lavish festivities. "Where are your husband's parents?" Agata's father asked. "Aren't they attending?" "You met them earlier, Dad," Agata answered. "Such events aren't really their cup of tea, especially at their age." "I noticed," her father acknowledged. "Still, they didn't seem that frail." "I can't say," Agata shrugged. "I suppose they know what's best for them." "Why does it matter?" her mother interjected. "Is it really our concern?" "It just feels off, almost unfair," her father reflected. "But, you're right, it's none of our business. What truly matters is your happiness," her mother embraced Agata. "You do love him, beyond all this opulence, right?" "Absolutely, Mom," Agata assured her with a smile. "I genuinely love him." "That's all I needed to hear," her mother whispered, eyes misting over. "I wish you boundless joy." Following their wedding, the newlyweds embarked on a Pacific cruise. It was like a scene straight out of a blockbuster, a majestic ship that was a city unto itself. They had a palatial multi-room suite, impeccable service, and a myriad of entertainment options. Seawater pools, a variety of restaurants, bars, a billiards club, dance floors, a movie theater, a spa center. The amenities were endless. Best of all, everything was prepaid and all-inclusive. For Agata, it was a childhood dream come true. She'd once whimsically wished, while playing fortune-telling games with a friend, to marry a wealthy, doting, and attractive man, and then have 2 children. Now, with a possible millionaire or billionaire for a husband, the first part of her innocent wish was realized. As for his wealth specifics, Agata never pried. There was no questioning his love or good looks. The final part of her dream, starting a family, seemed to be unfolding as well. In one of their stops, Tripoli, Agata felt queasy upon seeing a tray of ornate pastries brought over by a waiter. "I won't be having that. Please take it back," she declined. "Señora, I assure you it's freshly made," the waiter attempted in somewhat broken Spanish. But Agata was firm. "No, thank you." "Remove it," Roberto commanded with a stern gaze. His succinct directive held more sway than Agata's gentle refusals. "Are you all right, love? Feeling ill? Perhaps the sun got to you?" Roberto's eyes were filled with concern as he studied her. "You're looking quite pale." "I'm not sure." "Let's return to the ship," Agata replied weakly. "I'm not feeling my best." The doctor they summoned, after examining his affluent patient, flashed a grin and jokingly commented that he wouldn't be stepping on the midwife's toes. Nonetheless, he graciously accepted the fee, as well as the generous tip that an elated Roberto handed over, without really counting the bills. "Ah, Signor," the doctor exclaimed with exaggerated surprise. "Rest assured, your young prince will be the picture of health and happiness." "That he will," Roberto confirmed with a confident smile. "He'll have nothing but the best." After bidding the doctor farewell, Roberto requested a bottle of a particularly expensive vintage champagne to be delivered to their suite. "To our son. To our future," he toasted, pouring a bit of champagne for both himself and Agata, who tried to decline. A single sip of fine champagne won't harm anyone. True enough, nothing adverse happened. The lingering nausea even seemed to wane. Overall, the journey proceeded smoothly, save for the fact that in the latter part of their trip, Agata developed an aversion not just to the smell, but also the sight of pastries and ice cream. "It seems I have selective morning sickness," she quipped. "Everything's fine as long as I avoid desserts." "It's probably because you're carrying a boy," remarked an elderly Russian woman, whom they frequently saw at the ship's restaurant. One day, Agata decided to engage her in conversation, and the two quickly found common topics to chat about. "Oh, is that so?" Agata responded with amusement. "My husband believes the same. He's quite keen on having a son." "An heir, you mean?" the older woman queried, her eyebrow arching gracefully. "Are you, by chance, descended from nobility?" Caught off guard, Agata replied hesitantly, "No. I'm not certain." With a gentle demeanor, the elegant woman clarified, "My dear, the term heir is traditionally reserved for contexts where the child is either from a lineage not less esteemed than that of a count or in reference to an upcoming monarch. Just some food for thought, my dear." She regarded Agata with a mix of tenderness and perhaps a touch of regret. Money alone, even vast fortunes, does not grant someone entry into high society. Yet, these days, many seem to think it does, she remarked, signaling the approaching waiter. "Dear, please bring me a cup of coffee." "Of course," the waiter replied with enthusiasm. "With lemon and 1 sugar?" "Just 1 spoonful of sugar," the aristocratic woman clarified with a gracious smile. Agata had come to learn that this was Georgia Bosques, the sole remaining scion of a once sprawling and distinguished ancient lineage. Only a shadow of their immense wealth remained. However, it was evidently substantial enough to afford the luxuries of life, such as this cruise. "And your esteemed husband's profession?" she inquired, delicately stirring her coffee with a slender silver spoon. "He's in business," Agata responded promptly. "In business?" the woman echoed pensively. "In my day, no one would have simply said an occupation. It would have been deemed too vague." "I'm not entirely sure," Agata admitted sheepishly. "He has numerous enterprises. Real estate, stocks, investments in sports facilities and events. That's what he's shared with me." "That's more than enough, dear," the older woman replied gently. "A young lady needn't concern herself with the intricacies of her husband's dealings. It's enough to be apprised of the general state of his assets and their maintenance. That's what prenuptial agreements were designed for. I trust they're still popular?" "I'm not sure," Agata confessed, a bit flustered. "I'm quite unfamiliar with such matters." "Perhaps it's best we change the subject," the Countess suggested, shaking her head. "It's verging on impropriety. Tell me, are you enjoying our little journey?" "Little?" Agata questioned, taken aback. But, quickly regaining her composure and not wanting to seem uninformed, she added, "Yes, very much so. Everything's been perfect, save for my condition." "My dear," the Countess consoled, tenderly caressing Agata's hand, her own ensconced in a lilac silk glove. "There's no greater joy than motherhood awaiting you." "Thank you," Agata replied gratefully, and, compelled by curiosity, inquired where might one acquire such exquisite gloves. In Paris, naturally, the Countess responded nonchalantly. You must visit me when you're there. I'll personally introduce you to the best places. I'd love that, Agata said, her smile radiant. Internally, she marveled, now, I can truly afford such luxuries. At the end of their chat, Georgia Bosquez handed over her business card. Embossed on sturdy cardstock was the Countess's name and initials set against a blue background adorned with a golden emblem. It also bore her Parisian address and, quite modernly, a phone number. There was no email address, suggesting that this particular form of communication was beneath her. After the cruise, the young couple made their way back. To be precise, Roberto was returning home, while for Agata, it was a completely unfamiliar, sprawling mansion. It was akin to a castle, situated on a vast piece of land, its exact size and hectares known only to God. Once, out of curiosity, Agata attempted to find the property's boundaries. Roberto had vaguely gestured towards the thick woods, mentioning a fence. During her exploration, she stumbled upon mushrooms and berries and trudged through a complicated mess of fallen trees, yet the elusive fence remained undiscovered. In the evening, she voiced her frustrations to her husband, who laughingly suggested he'd send someone named Goyo with a bulldozer to pave a path, given her keenness to discern their property's limits. It seems risky, Agata voiced her concerns. What if someone sneaks through the forest and into the house? No one will manage that, Roberto assured her with a chuckle. That's why we have security. Not even a fly can breach the garden pergola. This pergola, a grand green arch festooned with fragrant honeysuckle, demarcated the boundary between their meticulously groomed garden, reminiscent of an English formal park, and the encompassing woods. It took Agata several months to familiarize herself with the myriad passageways, rooms, galleries, attics, cellars, and hidden crannies of their expansive estate. Of course, they had swimming pools, one outside and another indoors. Other amenities included a bathhouse, sauna, hammam, multiple garages, and living quarters for the staff, a sizable group that necessitated proper accommodations. The estate also boasted various outbuildings, garden pavilions, and intricate topiaries crafted from rapidly growing shrubs. Truly, one could reside here indefinitely without a hint of ennui. Agata's pregnancy evolved without complications. Physicians would make house visits, a luxury she grew accustomed to. They opted for a home birth, assuming no unexpected issues arose. Necessary medical apparatus was set up, transforming one of the rooms into a makeshift hospital ward. Everything transpired smoothly and with remarkable speed. Before she knew it, Agata was cradling their son, Eugenio, a healthy baby boy weighing 3.5 kilograms. Roberto's elation was palpable. Within a month of Eugenio's arrival, he orchestrated a grand celebration, inviting what seemed like half the town. Agata was hesitant, given their child's tender age, but Roberto was insistent on showcasing their heir. He'll be safe. We'll present him from a distance, that's all, Roberto comforted her. Let's just enjoy ourselves. All right, Agata conceded, I trust it'll be all right. Indeed, the lavish party went off without a hitch. Agata made an early exit, her priority clear, to nourish and lull her baby to sleep. Rest now, my darling. I cherish you, my dear son. She declined numerous nanny offers, retaining only 2 whom she personally selected. They alternated shifts, occasionally lamenting that their employer left them with minimal tasks. She was adamant about handling nearly everything herself. Agata genuinely devoted most of her time to her son, relishing in feeding, bathing, conversing with him, and lulling him to sleep. Naturally, their extensive estate made for delightful walks. For the first 6 months after Eugenio was born, Agata set aside her sporting pursuits and any semblance of work. She ventured out a few times, but swiftly lost the zeal for what now appeared to be a fruitless endeavor. Why seek employment? They were already in possession of every imaginable luxury. Nevertheless, she gradually reintegrated her training regimen, reviving her routine workouts to restore her postpartum physique. 2 years into this serene existence, she was expecting once more, and soon enough, the couple was blessed with another son. Roberto continually lavished Agata with presents. Following their firstborn's arrival, she was gifted a state-of-the-art, luxurious red Mercedes, and after their second, a renowned brand's diamond necklace, not to discount the ceaseless stream of smaller tokens. Engrossed in his profession, Roberto was incessantly in meetings or traveling, occasionally vanishing for days. Yet Agata never felt overlooked or envious. She never surmised he was attempting to create a rift between them. Quite the opposite, Roberto endeavored to allocate ample time for his family. He cherished their children, bestowing abundant care upon them. He participated in swim lessons with the elder and frequently indulged them with new toys, presents, and treats. They undertook numerous family trips overseas, and even more often, the couple would steal away on romantic retreats, entrusting their children to a trustworthy nanny. It was an enchanting period. To this day, despite subsequent events, Agata looks back on those irrecoverable years as the pinnacle of her life. However, calamity struck, as it often does, without warning. One day, a stark departure from his customary disposition, Roberto arrived home exuding an aura of melancholy and restraint. He reprimanded the staff, an action he'd never resorted to before, and even rebuked their young son. After dinner, a concerned Agata inquired, "What's amiss?" "Nothing, dear," he responded, his tension ebbing slightly. "Just some challenges at work. It's been a grueling day." "Come," she beckoned with a reassuring smile, "I'll treat you to a soothing massage," guiding him to a room resembling a home spa. But a few days later, the cycle repeated, the shouting, the anger, the piercing glares. This continued for some time until it seemingly subsided. Agata, believing the storm had passed, let out a sigh of relief. Hence, the day Roberto returned home around lunchtime, an oddity, as he never came back that early from work and frantically began packing his things while instructing Agata to do the same, was all the more alarming. "We have 1 hour to pack. Get the nannies to help you with yours and the children's belongings. We'll take as much as can fit in one car, we're leaving." "Where to?" she asked, perplexed, as no vacation had been planned. "I'll explain later," he muttered, rushing back to his study. He frantically searched through drawers and cabinets, shredding and burning some papers. "Roberto," she ventured into his study, her eyes welling up. "What's going on? At the very least, tell me what to pack, for a beach or a mountain trip." "What resorts?" he snapped. "We're not heading to any resort. We just need to lay low in a secure place for a bit." "A secure place?" Concern lined Agata's face. "What's happened?" "No time." His frustration was evident. "No time for questions, Agata. Just pack and let's move." "How do I explain this to the staff?" "Tell them whatever you want." "Damn the staff. Damn everything." In a fit of fury, he hurled a hefty paperweight at the bookcase's glass door. The ornate glass let out a somber tinkle as it shattered, scattering sharp fragments on the rich parquet flooring. Like the troll's mirror, Agata mused, reflecting on the Snow Queen fairy tale where a malevolent troll's magic mirror becomes a harbinger of manifold human miseries. Roberto, lighting a cigarette and clearly agitated, sped off in the car. He ignored Agata's objections over his perilous driving speed and smoking near the kids. He barked a few sharp words, his temper flaring, causing her to bite her tongue. Nestled in the back with the children, she held them close, silently praying for a safe journey. Hours later, they pulled up to a nondescript roadside motel to rest and attend to the crying children. Roberto settled for a modest triple room, noting they'd resume their journey at dawn. As the night settled, Agata lulled the restless boys with a familiar song, wearing her customary smile, doing her utmost to make it all seem like just another ordinary day. "Just a short trip," she soothed them. "You'll see, it'll be fun." "I want to go home," the elder child whimpered. Meanwhile, the younger one, still struggling with words, pulled at his sleeve and cried softly, sounding much like a distressed puppy. Eventually, their fatigue and worries took over, and they drifted to sleep, sprawled out across the large bed. Agata watched them, gently closing the door behind her, and stepped onto the petite veranda. Roberto was there, seated on a wicker chair, seemingly on his umpteenth cigarette of the day. She quietly settled onto the adjacent chair and placed a cup before him she'd brought from the room. "Here, chamomile tea," she offered, her voice quivering slightly. "I had packed tea bags from home." "Thanks," he murmured, taking a sip before setting the cup down. She held her tongue, deciding it best to wait for him to share when he was ready. The pair sat in contemplative silence, watching the constant flurry of vehicles on the highway before them. Night had completely set in, a myriad of lights rushing past their temporary refuge. "I'm sorry," Roberto eventually whispered. "I acted horribly." Agata simply nodded, hoping he would elaborate. But he continued gazing into the distance, lost in his thoughts. "Should we rest?" she suggested gently. "You need to go," he declared suddenly. "Go far away." "Alone." "What do you mean alone?" Confusion filled her eyes. "And where will you be?" "I can't leave right now," he confessed, shaking his head. "I'll get you to an airport tomorrow, but I'm unsure which one. Just don't fly from our usual airport to avoid immediate tracking." "What's going on?" The weight of uncertainty was too much for Agata. "You have to tell me something. This is all too much." "I'm broke," he admitted dejectedly. "I've lost everything." "How?" Confusion marred her features. "Issues with the business? And our home? The car? Our belongings? It'll all be taken." Roberto's voice was laden with despair. "Everything's gone. Our only hope is to sell what we can and retrieve the funds. I'll find a safe place for you. As for me, it looks like I'm starting from the bottom again. You won't abandon me, right?" His gaze sought hers, illuminated faintly by the motel entrance light. They didn't turn on the lights on the veranda, so they sat in almost complete darkness. "No, of course not. What are you saying?" She stood up from her chair, walked over to him, and embraced him. He hugged her back, and then he started sobbing uncontrollably, shaking violently like a little boy, his whole body trembling with sobs. "SHH, SHH." Agata comforted him. "Everything will be fine, don't worry, my dear." "No, nothing will be fine anymore," he sobbed. "I've lost everything. Can't you understand? Everything. But not everything. We're still here with you, right?" Agata stroked his head and whispered the sweetest, most tender words that came to her mind. But deep inside, her own soul was filled with darkness. Uncertainty and fear weighed heavily on her heart. By morning, barely dawn, they were on the move again. While they were traveling, Agata booked tickets at an Egyptian hotel. Luxury was no longer a priority. They settled for something ordinary, not too expensive or prestigious. "Let's go for 2 weeks. Here's the money I managed to gather." "We'll manage for a while," Roberto hurriedly told her. "I'll take care of some matters here, sell what I can, and then I'll join you. We'll come back together, that's the plan." "Okay?" "Okay," Agata agreed. "Be careful, my love. Call us, all right?" "All right." He kept looking around like a cornered animal the whole time they were at the airport. And finally, convinced that they had passed through the boarding gates, he let out a relieved sigh. He waved at them from behind the glass windows of the waiting area and walked away without turning back. Agata left with a heavy heart. A dreadful, oppressive premonition tormented her, giving her no rest. They had a good flight, reached the hotel by transfer, and settled in. Everything seemed normal. Roberto sent her a message, forbidding her from calling him. He said he would call whenever possible. He replied that everything was fine for now. Agata sighed, checked on the sleeping children, and herself sank into an uncertain and restless sleep. The first few days went calmly. Roberto called her twice, and his voice sounded a bit brighter. He said everything was fine, as much as it could be at the moment. They exchanged messages daily, and the hotel was quiet, sleepy, and peaceful. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, beach, pool. Kids club, everything according to schedule. Agata caught herself thinking more than once that she would like to stay here forever, as long as Roberto was by her side. Let it be like this for as long as possible. Let nothing ever happen. And the best news would be the absence of any news. Towards the end of their short vacation, Roberto called once again and said he couldn't come to them. He told them to fly back on their own, and he would meet them at the airport. Agata sighed and started packing their suitcases. What awaited them upon their return? She didn't know. In the worst case, we'll have to go to my parents, she thought. I'll sell the car, the jewelry, everything will be sold, all those damn trinkets. We'll live like ordinary people. I'll find a job. It's nothing, really. As long as we're all alive and well. No one met them at the airport. Roberto's phone was unreachable, and Agata's heart was filled once again with that horrible premonition that had haunted her a few days ago. She dialed her husband's number over and over, but the relentless voicemail of the mobile operator repeatedly announced, in a mechanical voice, that the subscriber was either not answering or temporarily unavailable. The children whined, and Eugenio, the eldest, kept asking, "Where's Papa? When will Papa come?" Agata clenched her fists and smiled, comforting him as best she could. After waiting for as long as she could, she hailed a taxi to the train station. She arrived there, unloaded the children and their suitcases, and went to the ticket counter to buy tickets to her hometown. They had to wait half a day at the station before the train they needed departed. She still had some money, and that question was the very last thing on her mind at the moment. The most pressing and suffocating thought that consumed her, burning from within, was, where is Roberto? What happened to him? She hardly slept during the journey, startled by every noise and movement of the train. When her phone rang in the morning, she jumped up as if stung and rushed to it, as if it were her last hope, but it turned out to be her mother. Yes, Agata answered with a faltering voice and spent a long time telling her about their vacation and why Roberto didn't go with them. She didn't want to upset her parents yet, explaining her difficult situation to them, so she had to put on a brave face and make sure her mother didn't suspect anything. It was incredibly hard to do so. She wanted to cry and call for help, but instead, Agata laughed and smiled, describing her wonderful vacation and the unexpected matters that prevented her husband from flying with them. Finally, that threshold was left behind, and familiar suburban landscapes appeared outside the window. Hooray! We're almost home, the children shouted, bouncing on the compartment's couches like lively, restless balls. Even as they approached their home, Agata realized that something had happened. Something terrible, irreparable. After getting out of the taxi, she walked up to the gate and took out the keys from her bag to unlock it. But immediately, she noticed a white paper with red printed letters taped onto it. The edges of the paper were sealed with a dark brown stamp bearing an embossed coat of arms and something about the police. Agata's hands dropped, and her lips trembled, but the children were standing next to her. With their heads raised, they innocently looked at their mother, expecting her to open the gate so they could enter their home. What was she supposed to do? Well, my dear ones, she said to them cheerfully, let's play a game, shall we? Pretend that we're not ourselves, but thieves and burglars. Let's go, let's sneak into our home through the back gate. It will be fun. Awesome. Papa will be so surprised. Eugenio happily agreed. Little Felix whimpered, but he also succumbed to the collective impulse, and together they went around to the far gate that led straight into the woods. Agata desperately hoped that at least this gate wouldn't be sealed. Her calculations proved correct. This gate, forgotten by everyone for 100 years, covered in grass and some bushes, was easily found. The key smoothly slid into the lock and turned, granting them passage. At least that was something. They walked through their wooded plot, where the overgrowth was not as thick as on the outside, and passed through the garden pergola, entering their familiar, well-trodden paradise. It was quiet here, but in an unusual way. Then Agata realized that she couldn't hear the familiar gurgling of the small fountains and streams. They must have cut off the water supply. There was no soul in sight outside. The house stood sleepily with the closed iron shutters on the first-floor windows. With a pounding heart, Agata approached the front door, and there, too, she saw the exact same paper as on the gate. "We won't leave from here either," she told the children. "After all, we're little thieves, remember?" They entered the house through the back door for the servants, which apparently no one knew or remembered. By that point, Agata was so furious that she simply didn't care anymore. If there had been a paper here, she would have torn it to shreds without hesitation. The house was dim and lifeless, with electricity and water cut off, the gas boilers turned off. Luckily, Agata knew where everything was switched on. Pressing the necessary switches and levers in the boiler room, she restored light, water, and warmth to her home. She bathed the children, found some decent food from the supplies, fed them, and put them to bed. "Now it's quiet time," she told them. "Even little thieves need to sleep at noon." Then she went to explore the house, to see what was what. Stepping into Roberto's study, she stopped at the threshold, frozen in place. The entire large polished desk was entwined with colorful ribbons of paper. Getting closer, her face changed, and she screamed in horror. The chair on which Roberto usually sat, the tabletop, and everything around it was covered in dried dark brown stains. Her head spun, and her vision darkened. She might have fainted, but the thought of the children brought her back to her senses. She walked out of the study on cotton feet and carefully closed the door handle. Then she thought, turned back, found a cigar box in the broken bookshelf. It should contain a set of spare keys. "Yes, here it is, the key to the study," she said as she left again, locking the study with the key. She pulled the handle, making sure everything worked. And she slid down the wall to the floor, sobbing silently, pressing her hand to her mouth so that the children wouldn't hear and wake up. "Hello," she began making calls half an hour later, dialing all the numbers of Roberto's acquaintances and friends that she had. "Hey, do you know where Roberto is? I came back from vacation, and I can't reach him." "No? Well, sorry." She had called almost everyone, but no one could tell her anything. They said they hadn't seen him in a long time. They themselves wanted to know what happened and how things were going, and so on. Roberto's elderly parents shared a mobile phone between the two of them. It usually lay somewhere in their hallway, and they wouldn't hear or answer it for days. Only occasionally, when they felt lonely, they would call Roberto themselves. Usually, he received all the information from the gardener or the cleaning lady who came to tidy up. It made no sense to call them. Maybe she should go and see? Perhaps he had sought refuge there to escape troubles? At least let someone call. Agata thought in despair. And then, as if on cue, the phone on the smooth kitchen table jumped from a sudden, piercing ringtone. Yes, she cautiously answered the unfamiliar call. Agata Rodriguez, they confirmed in a dry, official tone on the other end of the line. Yes, it's me. Her heart tightened again, missing a beat. I'm a detective from the Special Affairs Department, the caller said. Have you returned to the country? Yes, Agata replied, stunned. Where are you calling from? We know everything, the detective interrupted her. We called you many times, but you didn't answer. My husband told me not to answer unknown calls, Agata said with a faltering voice. Can you tell me where he is? What happened to him? Where are you right now? The detective asked instead of answering. At home, Agata said. I will come to you within an hour. Don't go anywhere, all right? All right, she agreed, placing the phone on the table and resting her head on her hands as she stared out the window. And she sat like that until the arrival of the detective. In hindsight, Agata wanted to remember this part of her story the least. By then, she had already felt in her heart what had happened, and the detective's arrival didn't bring her any particularly unexpected news. Your husband, Roberto Rodriguez, according to the preliminary investigation, took his own life, he told her as if reading her rights before an arrest. This happened 4 days ago, on the 26th of July. Oh, my God, she covered her face with her hands and froze, collapsing in despair on the chair. Oh, God, no. No. Gathering herself, she lifted her changed face, her lips now pale, and asked the detective, "Where is he now?" "The body is at the morgue. You will have to come for identification, although I must warn you that the face has been severely damaged." "It's unlikely you will be able to recognize him by his face," the detective replied. "Is it necessary?" Agata asked hoarsely, swallowing hard. "I'm afraid so," the detective replied heavily. Everything blurred into a heavy gray haze that filled the entire world. She took the children to her parents, briefly explaining the situation. Her mother wailed, drank valerian, and called the grandchildren poor orphans. Her father simply hugged Agata and told her to stay strong, not to worry about the children for now. Agata was very grateful to him for that, even to this day. Then came the morgue, the identification. She barely glanced at the body. There was nothing left to recognize. "Yes," she said weakly and nodded almost imperceptibly. "It's him." And with her inner vision, she could only see that horrible dried stain in the study. "All right, sign here." And endless papers, paperwork, interrogations. As if she were somehow to blame for all of this, and as if everything that had already happened wasn't enough. Their assets were seized due to debts, including her car. "Since you don't have a prenuptial agreement, half of this car belongs to your husband," the detective informed her. "Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it. You, as the heir, and the children are entitled to what remains after settling the creditor's claims." At the notary's office, she was told the same thing, more or less. It turned out that Roberto's parents were also heirs, and somehow mandatory ones, supposedly because they were already pensioners and couldn't refuse their share. Agata no longer cared, and it was clear to her that these creditors would leave nothing standing. Of what could be sold, she managed to retrieve only her jewelry, which she took to a pawnshop. It was something, of course, but still far less than the amount Roberto had once spent on them. She also sold several expensive watches, branded handbags, and various odds and ends she could gather from the house. With all the money earned, she bought dollars and opened a foreign currency account in her name. The notary told her that she would inform her of the remaining real property when the procedure with the creditors was completed. She took the necessary things for herself and the children and moved them to her parents' place. And for now, that's where they settled. Roberto's funeral was very modest, if not to say poor. When the investigation finally allowed them to retrieve and bury the body, only she, her father, and a few close friends gathered around a simple and inexpensive coffin. Roberto's parents seemed completely devastated by grief and, at the same time, somewhat indifferent, or so it appeared. Once again, Agata caught herself thinking that both of them seemed utterly unreal to her. She was amazed when, on the day she broke the dreadful news to them, her elderly father-in-law cautiously pulled her aside and said, stuttering and embarrassed, "My dear, we weren't actually Roberto's biological parents." "What do you mean?" She stared at him in silent astonishment. "We're from the same village as his real parents. We're considered distant relatives to them. His father died of bitter drink, and his mother hanged herself when he was just a little boy. Well, many years have passed since then. And how he himself came into the world, he came to our homeland, found us, and asked us to, how should I put it, well, pretend to be his real parents. That's it." The old man guiltily shrugged his shoulders. "I see," Agata said, stunned, looking at her fake father-in-law, unsure of what to say. Finally regaining her composure, she managed to say only, "You understand, I'm in a difficult situation now. Roberto left behind nothing but debts. I'm afraid I won't be able to help you like he did." "I understand, of course," the old man waved his hands. "We've already discussed everything. We've decided this, we'll sell this house and return to our village. The money we get from it will go to you and the children. We don't need any of this. Roberto used to give us money every month, so we're giving it back to you, dear. You're going through a hard time now. With our pensions, the old lady and I have saved up over the years, all thanks to Roberto, may he rest in peace. The old man sadly lowered his gaze and chewed his lips. Oh, my God. Agata was moved. Thank you. Thank you so much. She hugged both old people goodbye and left that little house forever. Everything turned out just as they promised. The sale of the plot and the wooden house yielded a surprisingly decent sum. In addition, there were the savings that Roberto used to transfer to the old couple. Agata's foreign currency account was replenished with new, quite substantial deposits. She breathed a little easier. She could now look into her own and her children's future with some optimism. Moreover, she found a lawyer recommended by her friends, who initially told her that she had come too late, that things could have been arranged much better. But afterward, Agata realized that it was nothing more than a professional bluff. Now or later, she inherited a mere fraction of Roberto's immense wealth, half the value of her car and a small portion from the sale of the estate and assets. The creditors had swept away everything else. Agata didn't know who those creditors were or what their connection to Roberto was, nor did she want to know. Now, she had to find a good job in her field, and it wasn't easy. Agata understood well that over the years she had spent away from professional skiing, too much had changed for her value as a skier to have diminished almost to zero. She would have to revalidate her qualifications, participate in competitions. But, of course, she could now say goodbye for good to the dream of participating in the Olympic Games, which had once seemed so attainable. All the plans to rebuild her life changed and collapsed when one evening a certain unfamiliar man called Agata, introducing himself as a friend and business partner of Roberto, and asked her for a meeting. Without hesitation, she agreed, hoping to learn some information about the final days of her beloved. They arranged to meet in a busy place, one of the small but decent cafes. Apparently, this business acquaintance understood that she could hardly afford an expensive establishment anymore, where they had thoughtlessly squandered enormous sums not long ago. "Good evening, nice to meet you." The unfamiliar man stood up from the table, gallantly pulling out her chair. He glanced at her with a sharp assessing look and smiled. "I can see Roberto didn't exaggerate your virtues." Agata didn't respond to this forced, far-fetched compliment. She simply looked at her counterpart in a way that made him shrink back and quickly say, "Well, why did I say that? Allow me to express my deepest condolences to you." She gave him a cold nod and asked the waiter for the menu. She ordered only coffee for herself and firmly rejected the clumsy attempts of this stranger to order anything else for her. "Let's get down to business," she said, smiling stiffly. Yes, of course." He took out some papers from his briefcase. "These are for you. Please, no unnecessary questions or emotions. Take a look at them at home. In short, these are lease agreements for bank safes and several accounts in your name. Roberto left them with me and asked me to pass them on to you if—" Here her interlocutor fell silent and lowered his head. "I understand," she said, now softer to him. "Thank you." "So, well," he perked up with her acknowledgement. "He also left you a letter. Please take it. And I guess I'll go now. I doubt you'll need my company anymore. Best of luck to you." The man left the cafe, and Agata remained seated at a small table by the window in a cozy, dimly lit corner. With a pounding heart, she carefully unfolded a plain white sheet from a daily planner on which Roberto had hastily written the following in his handwriting. "Agata, my dear. Forgive me for everything, but there is no other way out. Leo will pass on to you everything I managed to save. It's just a drop in the ocean, but it will allow you and the children to stay afloat for some time. I am entirely to blame before you, and I am fully aware of it. But right now, the most important thing is this: upon receiving this letter, leave the city immediately. The people who ruined me will soon realize that I outsmarted them and took away a portion of the assets. These are the very documents that Leo will give you. They must not know that you still have them. Withdraw all the money and transfer it to anyone, your parents, friends, take it in cash. Just make sure nothing is in your name. Please, do it as I wrote. It's for your own safety. Leave, hide the money, and start over. And I implore you, be careful, beware of everyone. Take care of the children and yourself too. Hug the boys for me and tell them that their daddy loves them very, very much. Loving you forever, Roberto. After reading the letter, Agata neatly folded it, put it in her purse, and walked toward the exit of the cafe. She didn't even realize that bitter tears were streaming down her cheeks. Agata didn't hesitate for long about where to go. She had a very good school friend who had moved to the big city to study several years ago. Many times since then, she had invited Agata to join her, enthusiastically describing the beauty of that ancient splendor and the advantages of living there. But Agata was far from enthusiastic about the local climate. She had visited with her parents long ago during her school years. However, now it seemed to her the only right decision. And she still fully trusted Viviana, despite not having seen each other for many long years. As a result, Agata did everything as Roberto instructed. She closed her accounts and safe deposit boxes, and she stored almost all the money in a hidden place she had known since childhood. She kept only enough for settling down in the new place, renting or taking out a mortgage for an apartment, buying a simple car, and keeping a certain amount of cash in foreign currency as an emergency fund. She firmly decided not to touch the main capital. It was all for the children, their inheritance from their father. Yes, it was safer not to flaunt any criminal money. That's how she and the boys moved to another city. Viviana was a great help during the initial period, showing her around and often taking the children to her place so that Agata could attend to her affairs. Viviana and her husband had a large apartment in a new building near the city center, and they also had a son who was about Felix's age. Additionally, they had a big shaggy dog, a parrot, and some other pets. The boys happily stayed with Aunt Viviana, playing with their new friend Franco and having fun with the furry, good-natured dog. Meanwhile, Agata tried to establish her life somehow. She wasn't accepted into any decent sports clubs. Too many years had been lost. Only one of the state ski sections treated her with kindness. Agata agreed to join them. After all, she had to start from somewhere. But the salary there was meager, so she started looking for side jobs and soon came across a good opportunity: occasional outings with a service team for organizing wedding celebrations, banquets, and similar festivities. They required an attractive appearance, good physical fitness, and endurance, all of which Agata possessed. The interview went well, and she was hired by the agency, even obtaining an employment contract on the side. Now, her financial situation improved, although she had to work diligently without rest on weekends and holidays. Often, she traveled far from her new apartment to countryside clubs and numerous moored yacht restaurants. Here, once again, they were serving an expensive, lavish wedding in an upscale restaurant on the outskirts of the city. It was similar to the one Agata herself had once had. However, she didn't regret all the luxuries of her previous well-off life in the slightest. She only deeply longed for Roberto and often lamented the cruel fate that deprived her sons of their biological father. So, when, in a sudden moment, she recognized her own late husband in the imposing groom, all the blood in her body rushed to her head. Rage clouded her eyes, and Agata, not understanding why or what she was doing, grabbed the microphone from the sound engineer's table and spoke those cruel words for the entire hall to hear. They simply burst out of her. And then that imbecile started chasing after her. Now, sitting in a restroom stall, she deeply regretted what she had done. What had she done? Perhaps that wasn't Roberto after all. Now Agata wasn't so sure anymore. Maybe she should go back and apologize. What had gotten into her head that someone wanted to catch her, to harm her? Maybe the security guard had sent his own people to stop her, to bring her back. To make her come to her senses and rectify her impulsive act. Or was it not? What if she had imagined it all? What if Roberto was alive? Then why did he do this to them? No, she didn't want to believe that. After agonizing minute by minute and not knowing what to decide, Agata cautiously slid the latch and stepped out. It was quiet and empty everywhere. The entrance door creaked, and she tensed up like a cat preparing to pounce. But it was just a stranger, probably from the movies. Then another one, and another. Agata realized that one of the screenings in one of the halls had ended, and a fairly large crowd would soon be exiting onto the street. She washed her hands, glanced at herself in the mirror, shook her head decisively, and also walked out. She rushed to the nearest subway station and headed home. Or rather, first to Viviana's place, where Viviana was sitting with her own children and hers as well. "Hi, how are you?" Agata greeted her. "Everything is great," her friend smiled. "You're here early today." Mama, her sons ran out and, interrupting each other, started telling her about some new game. "We finished early," Agata explained. "Shall we have coffee?" "Sure," Viviana agreed. "Or maybe some wine." "That works too," Agata wearily sank onto the couch. "I'm feeling a bit off. And I'm worried for no reason. You know. Is everything really okay here? What could happen to us?" Viviana laughed. "Franco and Felix not sharing Legos is the biggest problem of the day." "Well, thank God for Felix," Agata sighed with relief and took a sip from the glass her friend had brought. "Phew. And how is Pablo?" "Pablo is fine," her friend nodded, referring to her husband who was away on a business trip. "He's working." They continued to sit and chat about various things. Then Agata started gathering the children to go home. Fortunately, they both lived close to the subway station, convenient, nearby, and easy to reach almost anywhere. That's why she didn't bother buying a car for now, she figured it would do. Upon arriving home, she sent the children to the bathroom and then to bed. Agata took care of a few household chores herself and then stretched out in front of the TV to have a cup of coffee before sleep and watch something light. Unbeknownst to her, she dozed off, sweetly dozing and wrapping herself in a blanket. She was awakened by persistent knocking on the door. She had long turned off the doorbell so that it wouldn't ring when the children were asleep. Sitting up abruptly on the couch, she listened anxiously for half a minute, trying to determine if it was just her imagination. But no, here it was again, the knocking. Carefully approaching the door, she peeked through the peephole. No one was visible. Just as she was about to step back, deciding that no matter who it was, she wouldn't open the door for them, that's when that unsettling, insistent knocking sound echoed again. Agata went to her children's room, closed the door tightly behind her. She returned to the entrance, listened at the jamb, and said a little louder, "Leave, or I'll call the police." The knocking stopped, and soon she heard faint, cautious footsteps retreating. After such an incident, sleeping was impossible, so Agata went to the kitchen to boil the kettle. Just then, a notification chimed on her phone, and she swiped off the lock screen to read the message, "Agata, please open the door, it's me, Roberto. We need to talk." The phone slipped from her hands and fell to the floor, the coffee spilled, the cup shattered, and she, covering her mouth with her hand, locked herself in the bathroom, turned on the water, and finally let her emotions loose. She whimpered and howled like a she-wolf. Some time passed, she didn't count how long. It was already deep into the night when she emerged from the bathroom, checked on the children, everything was in order. Tomorrow, or rather today in the morning, she had to go to work, but her head was pounding, and her whole body ached as if in a fever. Agata made up her mind, to hell with this job, she would take sick leave. She cautiously approached the phone lying on the floor, pressed the mute button. Then she took 3 tablets of Corvalol at once, some calming drops, made her way to the couch, and sank into a deep, heavy sleep. Mama, soft little hands gently tapped her arm. "Mom, wake up. We have to take Felix to daycare and me to school." "Hello, little one." Agata opened her eyes and smiled tenderly at her eldest. "Do you really want to go to school?" "Well, not really," Eugenio whispered. "But we have to, right?" "You know what?" Agata suddenly decided, feeling refreshed after finally getting some sleep and surprisingly feeling quite good despite yesterday's events. "Let's take the day off today." "Can we?" her son asked doubtfully. But it's Monday. If we really want to, we can, Agata assured him convincingly. Come on, let's go make waffles. Waffles, her son exclaimed joyfully and ran to the kitchen. Soon Felix woke up too. And the three of them spent a wonderful morning, taking their time. Agata called her workplace and informed them that she would take a couple of days off due to illness. She sent the same message to the school and daycare. With a clear conscience, she cleared the table, took the boys for a walk in the park. She had already forgotten when they all went out for a walk like this. Lately, they were always at Viviana's place, and it was time to put an end to that. Otherwise, she wouldn't see her own children grow up. Agata didn't yet have a clear plan of action and made a conscious effort not to think about Roberto. Every time she recalled the events of the previous day and evening, a wave of anger surged through her, directed at him and everything in general. Agata clenched her teeth tightly, trying not to scream out loud. Instead, she ordered herself to calm down, not to think about anything at all, and calmly walked with her children, enjoying their company in the surprisingly beautiful sunny weather. After a long walk, they went to an ice cream cafe. The boys were delighted, unexpectedly experiencing a fairy tale-like Monday. Of course, she understood that Roberto would eventually show up again. So, she wasn't surprised when she received another message inviting her to meet, accompanied by several pleading emojis. It's just ridiculous, honestly, Agata thought with bitter irony. Did it really require staging everything as if he had died just to leave his family? Couldn't it have been any simpler? She wound up her nerves once again and replied that she could meet later in the evening. She sent a link to a small cozy cafe where they often sat with Viviana. However, how everything would play out and what she would say to her resurrected husband seemed very uncertain to her. At the appointed time, she did indeed see him near her table. Agata purposely arrived early to put herself in a more advantageous psychological position. She wanted him to search for her gaze while she observed from her corner. Well, she looked, Roberto had changed little, except for growing a neat little beard. Ah, there you are, my dear, he approached her, smiling guiltily. She held out her hand in a warning gesture. No dear or anything like that. Can you even imagine what I've been through? And the children? Agata, Roberto sighed heavily and sat down on a small couch opposite her. I'm truly sorry. It was all necessary. Really? She looked at him with a devastating gaze. Necessary for what? So you could peacefully marry another woman? Women have nothing to do with this, he waved his hand dismissively, making a disgusted face. You know I love only you. I don't know anything, she said softly, so as not to attract attention, but firmly. Nothing at all. What kind of person are you? How did we live? You kept me in complete ignorance all the time. Just for your own good, Roberto interjected into her accusatory speech. For my own good, you should have done completely different things, Agata said firmly. Not get involved in dubious adventures, not waste money, and secure a future for our children. But for now, my only good is them. Our sons, for whom I now work tirelessly like a horse, without breaks on weekends. And suddenly I find out that my beloved late husband has come back to life and has decided to tie the knot again. Surely, for my own good. She added mockingly and smirked. Let me explain everything to you, Roberto pleaded. I don't want any explanations, Agata said firmly. If you had the conscience to stage this vulgar performance, forget about the existence of your family, and then calmly marry someone else, what's there to explain? I didn't forget about you. Roberto protested. I think about you and the children every day. And this wedding, you see, it's just a show. Like everything you touch, Agata sneered bitterly. Starting from your fake parents and ending with our entire life together. Let's say you think that way for now, Roberto agreed. If you hadn't accidentally stumbled upon all of this and witnessed it yourself, he sighed awkwardly, then after some time, I would have come to you myself, you know. Agata remained silent, looking at him with eyes devoid of sight, filled with bitterness. This new wife of mine is the niece of a very influential person, you understand? Roberto continued speaking quickly, hurriedly, trying to convince her of the urgency of his words. I need his support to extricate myself from the mess I've gotten into. Start over. Once I get back on my feet, I'll get a divorce, and we'll be together again. Do you really think that? Agata asked, with a nervous laughter in her voice. Is that your grand plan? Fix your life at someone else's expense and then discard the person who loves you like a used cup, right? I wouldn't be surprised if you obtained your previous prosperity through the same counterfeit means. Well, it all deflated like a soap bubble, she said sadly. Now Roberto fell silent, sulking and furrowing his brows, waiting for her to say something else unpleasant about him. So, my dear, Agata said mockingly, forget even the thought of returning to me and the children. For them, you're dead, and that's it. There's no point in trying to resurrect what's dead, we'll only cause them more pain. Surely, you're no longer Roberto, or am I mistaken? No, Roberto reluctantly admitted. Well, let's leave it that way, Agata concluded. The money you sent with Leo, I withdrew it, just as you instructed, and hid it in a safe place. It's a fresh start in life for our children and me. I'll do my best to raise them as good people, and they'll only know that their father loved them very much. Someday, I'll tell them that it was the last thing he wrote in his farewell letter. That's the image of their father. It's the best they can have, wouldn't you agree? And it's also a decent starting capital. When they grow up, it will be up to you to reveal yourself to them, whether you're alive or not. I believe it's unnecessary, but I can't influence you, unfortunately. You should do what you think is necessary and right. Just think deeply before doing anything. Well, now, farewell. And please don't call me anymore, I beg you. Agata stood up, nodded to her unfortunate ex-husband, who had unexpectedly risen from the dead, and left the cafe. He remained sitting at the table, lowering his head and absent-mindedly tapping his spoon against the cup. Several years passed. Eugenio and Félix grew up and excelled in their participation in the skiing section, among other students taught by their mother. Agata had long found another job more suitable for her than working as a waitress at other people's celebrations. She conducted classes in several clubs and fitness centers, trained the junior national ski team, and frequently traveled abroad, accompanying her young athletes to various competitions. Success once again accompanied Agata, and her life entered a new peaceful and enjoyable phase. It was, of course, a bit challenging being alone with two teenage boys, but she had grown accustomed to it over the years. The boys grew up to be intelligent and obedient. The elder one was already a candidate for the title of Master of Sports, just like Agata once was. And the younger one wasn't far behind. There were whispers circulating in certain circles about him being an outstanding talent in skiing. One day, they went to Switzerland with the team to watch a biathlon race. Eugenio leaned more towards this sport and wanted to see the famous competitions live. After watching the athletes race, which they followed breathlessly, Agata and the boys decided to go to a nearby restaurant to warm up and have a snack. One of the world's most famous alpine ski resorts was nearby, and the next morning they planned to test their skills on the challenging and exciting slopes. Mom, look, Eugenio cautiously tugged at Agata's sleeve, pointing with his eyes at the man sitting at the adjacent table. That's the biathlete who won the race today. Oh, come on, son, Agata replied quietly. If it were him, he wouldn't be sitting here alone. Besides, he's the favorite and the star. No, really. I'm telling you, it's him, the persistent teenager insisted. I'm going to express my admiration to him. Go ahead. Agata agreed, tired of trying to dissuade her stubborn son. Just remember, don't say that I didn't warn you. What do you think? She asked Félix, her younger son. I don't know, he shrugged. He does look similar, I guess. But I wouldn't be so sure. Félix took after his mother, being as cautious and diplomatic as Agata herself. Meanwhile, Eugenio increasingly reminded her of his hot-headed and stubborn father. She sighed, fearing that he might repeat his father's terrible mistakes. Suddenly, lively English conversation could be heard from the neighboring table, and a delighted Eugenio, shining like a newly minted coin, returned not alone but with a man he approached effortlessly. "Meet Mr. Klaus Dastenschifter," he introduced him to his family. "And this is my mom and younger brother. They're also skiers," he added in English to his companion. Agata couldn't believe her eyes. The winner of today's competition was indeed standing before them. Regaining her composure, she expressed her pleasure in meeting him and invited him to join them. "I'm very grateful," the athlete politely responded and took a seat at their table. Soon, they were chatting merrily, sipping hot grog and non-alcoholic mulled wine, and agreed to go skiing together the next day. "Pleased to meet you, Agata," Klaus unexpectedly said in Spanish with a noticeable accent as they were about to leave. "You speak Spanish?" she exclaimed in surprise. "What a surprise!" "Yes, but not very well," Klaus confessed. "My mother is Spanish, but she lives in France." "That's wonderful." Agata smiled. "It makes things much easier, as I speak English terribly too." Everyone laughed merrily and went to their rooms. The following day was filled with sparkle and joy. After having their fill of skiing, Klaus spent a long time explaining and demonstrating real biathlon techniques to Eugenio, whose eyes lit up with joy. "Your son is truly talented, a young athlete." Klaus praised him, stumbling over his Spanish expressions. He could achieve great results among modern biathletes. "Well, let him train," Agata calmly remarked. "It will all depend on him. Training, training, and more training. That's what they say in my professional circle." "Oh, yes." Klaus agreed. "That's very true. By the way," he added, turning to Eugenio, "tomorrow there's a qualifying round for those who want to join my coach's group. He's a very strong mentor. Would you like to give it a try?" "I'd love to," Eugenio responded, "but I doubt they'll allow me to participate." "I'll put in a good word for you," Klaus promised, winking at the boy. "And you put in a good word for me with your mom, deal?" "Deal," the boy agreed without hesitation. "But what do I need to do?" "I need her to agree to accompany me to the gala dinner being organized today to celebrate our team's victory," Klaus explained. "Ah, so that's why you were sitting alone there yesterday?" Eugenio tactlessly remarked. "They postponed the celebration?" "We usually hold the gala dinner on the following day," Klaus replied. "That way, everyone has a chance to recover and absent family members and friends can join us." "I see," Eugenio chuckled. "I'll tell my mother, but I can't promise anything. You know how she is? A tough nut to crack." "Thank you, I'll keep that in mind," Klaus replied seriously. And that's where they parted ways. "What's this gala dinner they're talking about?" Agata protested. "I highly doubt my name is on the guest list." "Mom, come on," her sons pleaded. "You're being invited by the race winner himself." "I didn't see any invitation," Agata stood her ground. Just then, there was a knock at their chalet door. Felix went to open it and returned with a huge bouquet of roses. The bouquet had Klaus's business card and an invitation card to the gala dinner, signed by the head of the International Biathlon Federation. "Well, what did I tell you?" Eugenio triumphed. "Huh? Now it's a completely different matter," Agata smiled. "Of course, I'll go. But how do I inform them of my acceptance?" This question was also resolved quite soon. After a while, an assistant of the famous athlete arrived and brought a large flat box. "Mr. Dastenschifter humbly asks you, madam," the messenger bowed, "to accept this modest gift and informs that he will come to pick you up at 8 o'clock. There was no way to refuse. Inside the box was a gorgeous dress that fit Agata perfectly. "Mom, you look like a movie star," the boys exclaimed unanimously. "Behave yourselves in my absence." Agata warned them and left an hour later with Klaus, who also looked like he belonged on the red carpet, dressed in a sleek black suit and bow tie. "Do you not have a more suitable companion for this evening?" Agata asked while they were driving to the hotel where the gala dinner was taking place. I lost my wife several years ago, Klaus simply replied. I have been without a companion for a long time now. Oh, I'm sorry, Agata apologized. I didn't mean to. It's all right, he said and smiled. That's what they say, isn't it? Yes, that's what they say when they want to hide their sorrow, Agata whispered softly. And there they were, at the hotel, with a beautifully decorated entrance, numerous cars at the entrance, well-trained bellboys welcoming the guests. Lights sparkled, champagne chilled in silver buckets filled with ice. Camera flashes, a crowd of people, swift and invisible waiters scurrying back and forth on the polished marble, like quick black and white penguins on slippery ice. Then came the grand reception. Guests were seated at many oval, beautifully decorated tables. Drinks were poured, exquisite dishes served, speeches given, and, of course, champions of the competition were awarded. Klaus was among the front rows. He received his award, delivered a brief thank you speech, and within 5 minutes was back at his seat, next to Agata, who looked absolutely stunning in a long violet dress adorned with ostrich feathers and sequins. You and Maman must visit us in France, Klaus told her. Oh, really? Agata smiled. I was invited to France once before. A long time ago. So many years have passed, and I still haven't made up my mind to go. Then it's high time to make it happen, Klaus told her. We'll stroll through the Champs-Élysées, admire the Eiffel Tower, and take a boat ride on the Seine. That sounds very romantic, Agata agreed. Perhaps I'll take you up on your kind invitation someday. Not just any way, no, her companion persistently continued to push his agenda. I would like you to come to me very soon. And not just as a guest, he looked at her meaningfully. Then in what capacity should I be? Agata clarified. I would like to introduce you to my mother as my future wife, Klaus replied. Agata almost spilled her champagne in surprise. I'm sorry, what did you say? Yes, Agata, you didn't mishear, he said. I have the honor of proposing to you, and I ask you to accept this modest gift as a token of my eternal love. Suddenly, he pulled out an elegant flat box from his jacket pocket and, upon opening it, handed it to Agata. He even went down on one knee. Stunned, Agata sat there like a statue, not knowing what to say. It was all too unexpected. But the audience at their table and those nearby quickly realized what was happening and greeted Klaus's actions with enthusiastic applause. Agata blushed like a lobster, quickly grabbed the box, her eyes sparkling, and muttered something unintelligible as she headed for the exit. Klaus caught up with her immediately. Did I offend you in some way, Agata? No. She stopped, breathing heavily. It's just not right. It's too unexpected and too fast. Tears welled up in her eyes. It's wrong, she exclaimed and rushed out of the hotel, not even bothering to get dressed. But he followed her and draped a fur cape over her shoulders, which she, in her distress, hadn't even thought to take from the wardrobe. Forgive me, Klaus said, looking into her eyes. But I simply can't miss my chance. I fell in love with you at first sight. I never thought it could really happen like this. I don't believe in love at first sight or rushed marriages, Agata replied seriously. Let's just say I've had a negative experience. Of course, I am in no way rushing you. Klaus assured her. I just want you to be sure of the seriousness of my intentions. It's our custom. Our custom? Agata didn't understand him. Yes, he opened the door of a waiting taxi in front of her. In aristocratic circles. I have the honor of being a descendant of two ancient noble families, Spanish and Austrian. All the best to you, dear Agata. I hope we will see each other tomorrow? I think so, she said to him, smiling. See you later. See you later. He waved after her, and the taxi disappeared around the corner. She carefully opened the box, which she awkwardly snatched from his hands, and saw a magnificent, clearly antique ring made of some heavy light metal with a huge oval blue stone. The stone's interlaced pattern formed some initials of two Spanish letters, E and U. Agata didn't understand what it meant, but she immediately felt calmer and brighter in her soul. 2 days later, they returned home. As she bid farewell to Klaus, Agata gave him her word that she would definitely come to Paris in the spring. He said he would arrange an invitation for her and the boys, and they would receive a special visa. I can apply for a visa to France myself. It's not difficult, Agata said. Our sports federation regularly provides them for participants of international competitions. But you won't be coming for a competition, but as a guest to us and my mother, Klaus smiled. Those are completely different things. In the end, they agreed that they would visit during the spring break and said their goodbyes. Back home, everything remained the same: work, training, competitions, and school. Eugenio, in the end, received an invitation to come and train with a Swiss biathlon coach during the summer break. He was flying as if on wings. But Felix seemed off and behaved strangely. One day, he came home from school, locked himself in his room, and stayed there until evening, refusing to eat or attend practice. "What's going on?" his mother questioned him. "Why are you acting like this? Did something happen at school? Should I call your teacher?" "No, Mom," her son said. "There's no need to call anyone. I just don't feel very well. Can I not go to school tomorrow?" "Seems like he doesn't have a fever." Agata touched his forehead. "I don't even know what to say. Can you at least tell me something?" "No, I want to sleep." The boy turned away from her, covering himself with a blanket. The strange behavior was explained the next morning. Agata didn't have classes until 2 p.m. She made pancakes, saw Eugenio off to school, and sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. Soon, Felix came out, frowning and yawning. He ate the pancakes and said, "Some man came to me and said he's my father." "Who's this man?" Agata became alarmed. "Where did he come?" "By the school," Felix reluctantly replied. "I went out, and he was sitting on a bench, a fat guy with a beard." "Why didn't you tell me right away?" scolded his mother. "I don't know. He called me by name and said he's my dad. And I told him that my father died many years ago, and he's mistaken. But he said he's not mistaken. And that it was you who forbid us from communicating, but he's alive and wants to meet me and Eugenio." "I see. What else?" "I told him it's all untrue and left. But he came back again and brought a photograph. It was you and him, much younger, and we were so little." "Mom, how can this be? You always said that our dad died." "Calm down, my dear. Your dad did indeed die. You and Eugenio don't remember that time, but it wasn't easy for us. I have a death certificate. I'll show it to you now." Agata rummaged through the drawer and pulled out the necessary document. "Here, take a look." The boy carefully examined the document and nodded. "Yes, I understand. I even remember some things. But there can't be any mistake here, right?" "I don't think so, my dear. I saw your father myself, you know? Anyone can obtain a photograph." "But what does that person want then?" Felix asked, his voice trembling. "I don't know, dear. I don't know." She embraced her son and held him tightly against her. "I promise you, listen, I won't let anyone intimidate us, separate us. I won't let it happen." "Okay, Mom," the son said and smiled at her. The next day, Agata arrived at Felix's school about an hour before the end of classes. She walked around the entire schoolyard but didn't find anyone even remotely resembling her ex-husband. She waited in the car until the classes were over and picked up her son, as she often did. "Did you see that man today?" she asked Felix. He answered no. The next day, she came again, and the day after that, but he was never there. On Friday, she saw him from a distance. He looked grumpy, plump, sitting on a bench opposite the school entrance. "Hello, Roberto," she said to him, approaching closely. He flinched and stared at her. "Hello." From his face and overall appearance, she could tell that he had been drinking, and quite a lot at that. "What do you want from Felix? What do you think?" He smirked. "He's my own son. Can't a father communicate with his son? He doesn't remember you and doesn't know. He's convinced that his father died. Why are you scaring him? I want him to know me." Roberto insisted. "And Eugenio too." "No, it's impossible. They don't remember you." "It's not my fault they don't remember me," Roberto said inappropriately, growing agitated. "It was you who prevented us from communicating." "Correct me if I'm wrong," Agata said with an unpleasant tone, "but the last time we saw each other, you unexpectedly came back to life, changed your name and all your documents, and just got married, right?" "Yes," Roberto reluctantly admitted. "And what has changed now?" "Everything. Everything has changed," her ex-husband angrily replied. "I'm already divorced, it didn't work out." "So, what are you doing now?" "Oh, you know, a little bit of everything," Roberto vaguely muttered, waving his hand. "Well, at least something hasn't changed." Agata laughed. "You could never properly explain to me the nature of your activities. So listen carefully. I will say it once and won't repeat it. You better never show up near us, neither here nor anywhere else where my children are. Don't dare to intrude into our lives, trying to bring back the past in any way. It won't work, only cause harm. And if you continue in the same manner, I will report to the police that some individual regularly scares my underage child. I doubt you can documentally prove that you're his father. So, here's some good advice for you: leave and never come back. Understood?" "Understood," Roberto meekly said, and immediately looked at Agata imploringly. "Just give me some money from what I gave you with Leo, please. I'll give it all back, I swear." "Money?" Agata exclaimed. "Oh, I see. So, you're in need of money, huh?" "Yes," Roberto nodded. "How pathetic and insignificant you've become." Agata looked at him with disgust. "That money is for my sons. I didn't take a penny from it and haven't spent it. And it won't go to you either, don't even think about it. That money is their foundation, their safety net. Call it whatever you want. And it's an inadequate compensation for the absence of a father in their lives. What were you thinking when you were involved in your dirty business, which you ultimately paid for? Certainly not about your children. Now go and never return. Otherwise, I will make sure justice is served." Agata turned and walked resolutely towards the school entrance. Spring in Paris greeted them with the fragrance of blooming trees and shrubs. It was an explosion of colors and scents. On every corner, from the tiniest window of every shop, there were flowers, flowers, flowers. The whole city seemed to be immersed in countless hues. It was magnificent. And Klaus, meeting them at the airport, brought a lovely bouquet of delicate irises and narcissus. "Welcome," he said. "How was your flight?" "Everything went well," Agata smiled. "We're not even that tired." They got into the car and drove along boulevards, bridges, and streets of this ancient and beautiful city, admiring everything that crossed their path. "What's this? Look at the beauty!" Agata and her sons exclaimed in awe again and again. Delighted by their reactions, Klaus sat next to the driver and, turning back, explained and narrated various things. They toured the entire city of Paris and then headed towards the countryside. There, they encountered magnificent views, albeit different, endless hills, winding paths, neat little houses that seemed like toys lined up along the road. Soon, the car stopped near beautiful lacework gates engulfed in blossoming magnolia and living hedges of yew. Behind the gates, there was another road, a small one covered in fine white gravel. It led through a park and ended at a genuine castle that looked like it came out of a textbook on the Middle Ages. "Welcome to Chateau de Martin," Klaus declared ceremoniously, opening the car door for Agata. Inside, the ambience perfectly matched their vision of a noble estate and aristocratic life. Elegant, with great taste. It was both simple and splendid. In the enormous ground floor, a large table was set, and after freshening up and resting from the journey, a well-trained footman invited everyone to the drawing room. A little later, a maid in a uniform and white cap brought in an elderly lady in a wheelchair, her hair completely white and her back straight. Despite being in a wheelchair, this lady looked rather good. "Allow me to introduce my mother," Klaus said. "Georgia Vasquez." Agata's eyes widened. It was the same elderly lady she had met during her honeymoon cruise in the Mediterranean, of course. "And this is my dear Agata," Klaus leaned towards the old woman. "Remember, Mom? I told you about her." "Of course, my dear," the Countess spoke in a creaky elderly voice. "I remember everything perfectly. Besides, I have already had the pleasure of meeting this lady." She smiled at Agata. "Do you remember me, my dear?" "Oh, of course, I remember you." Agata approached closer and kissed the woman's hand, clad in her trademark silk glove. "And I also hope for your assistance in choosing accessories." "Yes, of course." The Countess laughed. "I haven't forgotten about that either. How many years have passed since our little journey?" "I'm afraid quite a lot," Agata tactfully replied. Klaus looked at them, bewildered. How could these dear women, who were so close to his heart, know each other? Noticing his gaze, the Countess turned around and said, "My boy, if you behave properly, one day we will tell you the story of how we met your chosen one. Perhaps." Both of them laughed carefreely, and Eugenio whispered to Felix, "Listen, little brother. It seems like we don't know anything about our own mother yet. And we're not the only ones," the younger brother smiled. "But our new life, it seems, will be very interesting and exciting. And our mother will finally be happy. That's true. She deserves it more than anyone else in this world."
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.